Alright, let's try this again. I just recorded an entire video walkthrough of RPG Maker and then found out my mic was off after recording for like 15 minutes. So let's get this going. Let's do this. So, RPG Maker, classic. Let's see. So, first things first, the map editor. So, shit. So, point is, there are these tile sets. That's like the core of it. There's 5 main ones, A through E, and A is actually split into 5 different parts. So they have part 1, that's water, part 2, that's the ground and fences and countertops, and then there's 3, and that is, yes, 3 is buildings. So 3 is buildings. That one is, I should actually draw because it might help a little bit. So what's cool is you can right click to like copy a tile and then drag to, paste it, so to speak. And this is actually how you erase. There's not a proper eraser tool, but there are these other ones. And there's also a special tool for painting shadows. So they will automatically put shadows by default next to walls and buildings, but otherwise you have to draw in the shadows yourself. And you might need to do it also just to cover the gaps that their automated system might leave. So I'll show you, hold on, I need to change which tile set this points to. So I'll show you in the database really quick how tile sets are set up. So you have all the different ones that you might want with the different graphics that they'll have on them. And you set which graphics they use by choosing them from this menu. And this is how the water is formatted. This one's like probably the most complicated one. But it's similar to walls. So this one, you have 3 separate frames, and it tiles a lot like the wall tiles. So you have the outer like 24 pixels, I think, which will pretty much always be on the outside. You have this like 4 corner one, so that's at like the inside of the join of a corner. And then you have a single dot of it. And so this is the basis for how it makes all of the water in the game, and it animates through those 3 frames. And then, let's see, what else? So then stuff like, this is the mall that I chopped up, this is some industrial pipes, stairs. Oh, and I have different alternate versions for the day and night times at the mall. Stairs, escalators, this blackout version of the inside. And then here is a wall. So walls are cool because you can walk on the ceiling of walls. So that's how I use my cliff faces and stuff. And they're just like the water, so they have these inner join corners and that kind of thing to make them a little bit more complicated. Floors also have that, so do tabletops and counters. But what doesn't have that is the A3 buildings. Buildings are only just the square version. They assume that all buildings are square. So if you want to do different shaped buildings, they look best if they're multiple levels. So just to demonstrate to you how this all works. And also get into the layering a little bit, because they have 4 different layers, and in a more finished map, I can show you what that would look like. So this is my world map. It's big. And so it uses different layers for different things. So by default, layer 1 is ground tiles, but it's also building and wall tiles and water. For me, because I'm using so much transparency, like the corner of this roof is pointed, The water tiles are all semi-transparent, so you can see the ground underneath. And then my wall tiles all have these corners that require something to be behind them for it to look right. So I don't exactly use it how it defaults to, but yeah, you can see ground, cliff sides, that kind of thing. That's all in layer 1. Layer 2 is where I put most of my water, and then most of my walls and cliff sides and little ledges. Anything that relies on transparency really goes on layer 2. And then layers 3 and 4 are where most of the objects end up. It automatically defaults to these. And then in some areas like the forest where I have a lot of stuff overlapping, it starts to break somewhat because it only wants to put objects on layers 3 and 4. So it will allow you to layer 2 objects by default, but if you need to layer a third one, or even a fourth one, God forbid, then you need to go in and like hand place everything. And so as you can imagine, that was kind of a pain in the ass when doing this forest, because I had to put trees on all 3 layers for it to work. And of course leave a layer for the ground. And the ground was what helped a lot, because I was able to draw little paths that you would take. So light green is the outer path that you need a torch or machete to finish taking. And then the black dirt path is where you go straight to this little temple shrine area in the middle. And then these red dirt paths branch off to different hidden things. And there's a whole cave system. Now I'm just getting off track talking about the maps, but the caves are the same size as the overworld. And you can kind of see here how I... Oh, shit. Okay, it's just the transparency that makes it look like that. On some of my levels, let me see. I think right now the factory is really the only one that has it. I might have even taken those off. Oh, no, I didn't. So there's these things called parallaxes. It's like an image you put behind the map. So it's a hidden 5th layer, but you can't really do much with it by default. There are plugins to do more with it, but my game is really graphics intensive as it is, so I don't really need to do more of that. But the point is, you pick from, a selection of images to have as the background behind the level, and you can make it scroll, and you can also change it. So I have a sky changer that will, I don't feel like digging through here to find it, but the point is it will grab the time of day and also your Y coordinate on the map, because drawing the sky all the time and moving it, that's another graphics intensive thing. So even though it's behind everything, it will still do that by default. So I have it check how far below the horizon line you are, because if it's off screen by a certain amount, then I don't need to worry about it anymore. So I have it change the sky graphic to nothing at that time. And that's also similar. See, I'm getting so off track. I'm just showing you a bunch of shit. But how I do my, culling in general, because, this giant map with all of its water, with all of its characters, and all of that kind of thing, it gets really heavy to run, and it gets really slow. So I use the 6th map layer, which is invisible, called regions. And, in a lot of 2D engines, this would be how you denote collisions, like passability. Can you walk through things? But thankfully, RPG Maker handles that over here in the tile sets menu. So, the little X means you can't walk on it unless it's a ceiling of a wall, or the roof of a wall, not the roof of a building. And then the O means you can walk there. And then the star means that it would appear on a layer above the player. So the point is, these regions help me chop up the map into smaller parts, because I can have it check which region you're in. And then, you're in region 1, we'll take you to a map that's just the city area. So if we turn off regions, you can see it a little bit better, but I've erased everything that you wouldn't be able to see from within the city. And I have some no man's land zones, so I do need it to be kind of bigger than even that. because I use camera zooms and I use different background music. So a lot of stuff is happening dependent on the region. And because I don't want it to necessarily snap the moment you cross from one area to another, I have these region 2s that will fade out the music and change the camera zoom back to default. So that way, whenever you change locations, it doesn't feel quite as jarring. Um, yeah. And so I have a few different regions. Some of them are too big, and I'll end up shrinking them later. But here's the little west side of the town, the mountains over there. Here's the field, and I have to include the lake because you can swim around in the lake. The eastern part with the forest in it. The northern strip of mountains, which is another area I could totally shrink. But yeah. Oh yeah, so let me show you another thing. So how like characters work is with events. So let me show you an area that has some NPCs and some monsters in it. So for different events, I do different things. There are some where I just have it, coded for the area. So like this little trash can that contains something, it's fine to just be here. But there's some other stuff that I reuse a lot. So like monsters are a key thing. So I have this other map over here where all my monsters live. If I want an encounter to go a certain way, I code it in this over here using the visual scripting language that they have, which is barely a language, but it's a bunch of buttons, and it basically does what JavaScript would enable, but it does it in a sort of user interface instead of making you code. And so a lot of things are controlled with switches. So these are just an on-off state. That's sort of how my factory level works, is I have 2 different switches to tell us which tile set to be on. And then there's also variables, which are super useful for doing all kinds of shit. There's all of these different options that control different aspects of the game. And so like my burning bush is an enemy, but it looks like a normal bush, and you can either cut it down or you can burn it. So I have this bush common event, which, I made that a long time ago. There are certain things in this game that I made in 2021, and I just have learned better ways to do it since then. But it's the old way, possibly forever, maybe not. So the point is, it checks if you've got a torch, it checks if you've got the machete. If you've got the machete, it will cut down the bush with no drama. If you have the torch, it will burn the bush and make it into a burning bush, which is an enemy. It's kind of tough. It runs around, and when you fight it, it will have a new one appear every turn, even though its HP isn't low. So you end up getting ganged up on by these burning bushes pretty fast. And it can also set other bushes on fire, so I have this script that lets it tell other bushes to get on fire. And then it moves around at random very quickly, so it's like, ah! And then after you defeat it, I have this respawn timer, so you would have to leave and re-enter an area 7 times to get it to respawn when it's time to respawn. Or if it's in this like gladiator mode that I made, then it will just not have a respawn timer, and it'll come back the next time you go to that room. And so after it's dead, it checks if the respawn timer is above 1, and then it subtracts 1 and gets rid of it, so it doesn't do that again until the next time you come back. And then once that's at 0, it'll wait until respawn day to come back. If it gets down to self-switch C, that's being cut down. So if it gets there, then it's just chopped down, it erases itself, and it'll come back later, because you didn't fight it or anything. And then like some of these other ones, I have it first before it checks, are you touching it to start the battle? I have it check these other, I call them HMs, but it's field moves, right? So like whack would make it bounce away from you. Destroy would just blow it up with a missile. And zap would destroy it by zapping it with electricity. And so, yeah. I have NPCs set up the same way, so whenever there's an NPC walking around, they're just turning into a template NPC that I have on my NPCs template. So, like, here's Jonathan Van Ness. Whenever you talk to him, he changes his voice, and you run through the dialogue, and then after all of that, it turns back to normal. And then it changes depending on the switch. Switches are how it would control story events. So I have a scene where the person at the furniture store tells you no refunds, and at that point, Jonathan Van Ness's dialogue changes to forward you along on the story. And so once you've talked to the person he tells you to talk to, he's just like, all right, let's get this focus group on. And then from there, I'll show you. Hold on. So from there, Jonathan Van Ness is right here. Right there, even though that's a guard. So this is an example. At night, when it's after hours, there's a guard there instead of Jonathan Van Ness. And then after you clear the corporate office, there's a mass layoff, and all of the employees are replaced by monsters. So after the corporate is cleared, it's a guard forever. Here's a switch that controls these warp pads, and so whenever it's time for the focus group to begin, Jonathan Van Ness will walk you over. I don't know where I have that cutscene controlled, but Jonathan Van Ness will walk you over to the store, and then you have the fire escape, and Jonathan Van Ness will just keep walking towards the store. And these stairs, I want it to be a natural, you hold left, you go down the stairs, you know what I mean? Because having to hold diagonal movement to go kind of the only way you could go feels not completely natural or right. So I have, in my big old book of common events, this is where a lot of repeat stuff is held. So we've got the voice sound effects for messages. We've got this collectible heart rose that you find around, the math that happens when an enemy calls for help, all that kind of thing. Oh, and here's my 24-hour tints. So I came up with 24 different colors that it will change to depending on the hour. And if you are just now going outside from being inside, then it will snap to the appropriate color for the hour instead of fading slowly. We've got a lot of things going on in here. So, so here's what the stairs looks like. So it checks basically which direction is this part of the stairs from you, and then if you're going from the left to the right, then it moves you down right without you having to hold down and right. And same thing with if it's going left and you're below it, got this rope thing, so you can drop down rope from a cliff, and this controls how you walk while you're on the rope. All that kind of thing. I have indoor lighting too. I have all kinds of stuff going on. And so in here, there's all these switches that control warp pads, and the warp pads have an inactive state. They have an active state where it spins you around and then teleports you somewhere. And whenever you're choosing where to teleport someone, this is what that UI looks like. So you can just literally click a spot on the map and choose it. Same thing, here's the walking, so there's a lot of options for controlling movement. And yeah, I have some UCO grads in here. There's Amanda right here. So anyway, so yeah, like the factory, that's the sketch that I showed you. This is the very rough version of it that I have in the actual engine currently. So that sketch that I showed you, this is a room that's a really good example. I drew over this so much in my sketchbook that it's not even the same layout really anymore. It is a very similar layout, but there's not walls in there. There's a different staircase. The puzzle influences how you navigate this room, all that kind of thing. So for one, here's how the conveyor belts work. So I have this base conveyor belt over here where I just copy and paste. And this is just each direction that it could possibly be. And normally with an event, these pages will go in sequential order. So the rightmost one that it meets the conditions for is the one that would happen. So if I just pasted this in, it would always go up and not the other directions. But what I do is I copy and paste them. So like this one over here should go right when the red switch is on and left when the blue switch is on. So it's got the right one as its default, factory blue switch, move left. And then if you are above this particular one, because like on this map, the upper path can be above that particular conveyor belt piece. So if you're above it, then it wants to disappear. So that way you don't see this weird conveyor belt piece that's supposed to be below you on the same level as you, if that makes sense. And so here in the factory, my tile set has both of these red and blue floors on it, so I can just draw the paths. But whenever we have these switches, which that's a template object as well. So over on the template, it checks if you've got the zapper equipped. If you do, it plays this little animation on you, or on the event, I should say, sorry. And then it will turn yellow for a brief second while it decides if it should be red or blue, and then it turns red or blue. And then the same thing will happen, so no matter which state it's in, it'll flip. And then over on my factory map, I have this in the lighting. Since the lighting runs all the time to keep the camera angle consistent and to keep the color of the lighting consistent. I said camera angle. This is a 2D engine. It's just the zoom amount. But anyway, it will check if the red switch is on, then it will check which level you're on. Are you on the actual red path above the floor, or are you on the blue path, or are you on the ground below the red path? So if that's what's happening, it'll change which tile set is active. And it's two different versions of the same tile set, just with the passability flipped for if it's on your level, it's the below you circle passage. Everything else is an X to prevent you from just walking onto another level. And then if you're below it, then it goes to star, so it's on the layer above you and you can walk under it. And then if you're on the blue tile set, it switches to a version of the tile set where the red tile is cut out and the blue tile follows all of those same rules. So, yeah. It's pretty fun stuff. I have a script set up so that it will detect if you're on one of these ridged walls, and if you don't have the climbing gloves, you can't climb the wall. So that kind of thing is all over the place. What else? Yeah, here's the mall. Here's the wrap. Oh, I can show you billboards. Where are those? So the billboards are something that I use as kind of a hint system. So I made this character graphic that has every billboard possible on it. Clearly, I haven't designed very many. And then, depending on which condition it is, or what I want to put there, I just pick one. And then I do the same thing and use the switches to determine which billboard to show. Oh. Did my trackpad just die? Well, that's annoying. That's fine. I'm on my iPad, so that's fine. So, like, for example, I had this food court side quest. So, to hint that you should go do it, I have this now hiring food court billboard. I have an NPC who's walking around and she's like, oh, I'm so unemployed and I love to cook. And so it checks, have you completed the side quest already? If so, show the food court billboard. Or if you haven't, show the food court billboard. And then, yeah, it tells you all kinds of different things. There's this collectible / enemy that I have called the Shadow of a Man. And so I have a billboard that appears after midnight at a location where there's a shadow of a man to find. So this one is right next to the apartment, and in the apartment basement, there's a shadow of a man. And let's see. Oh, I have these fun teleporters above ground. I'm just showing you around now. So these have an inactive state. You can see them as just this mysterious glyph on the ground for you to be mystified by. And then when it's active, it'll take you somewhere. And so underground in the caves, I have these shrines, and you helped me come up with this, where you have the orbs that you get from the bosses, and you activate them at these shrines underground by fighting a really tough boss. And for story reasons, you're allowed to fail and not activate the orb, right? And so this particular one is taking you to this like final shrine where you have to have all 6 orbs present. And I have these warp pads appear or like become active when you make it to the little gate. So you talk to the gate here. Oh my god. And you can see it checks for every orb that you might have, and then it opens up, or either way it will activate the warp pads. So that way if you don't have the appropriate orb or assortment of orbs, you can still get back easily without having to maybe fight some boss that was there or whatever. Yes. And then I have, let me show you a few different other things. So I have my, where is it? The character customization. So normally, you have to choose a default image for your characters. So the player character is default this little ginger guy, but you can choose any of these other guys for him to be. And so at the start of the game, when you boot it up, it sets some starting variables and switches and shit. And then it asks you to choose your name, asks you to choose your class, basically, so that's how it decides your stats and everything. I can show you that in a second. And then if you choose one that's more geared towards special attack, you'll get a megaphone instead of the default pocket knife. And then once all of that is set up, it takes you to your apartment. But there's a key element here that it is a common event, and it is that character picker. So let me show you that really quick. So, there it is. So what it does first is it shows the character portraits all in a line, and it asks you which one of these is your style or whatever. And then if you're hitting the arrows, it'll make a different one get bigger and the other ones get smaller and transparent. And then and it will also change your appearance variable at that time so that you can see what your little mini sprite looks like too. And then once you're done, it saves those. It changes your swimming graphic. It changes your battle graphic. It changes your face graphic. And then I have it change, because you'll be able to play as all 4 of them, basically. Later in the game, they'll be optional, or I think one of them will be in the story. But the point is, it changes the one that would have the appearance you chose to one that you didn't choose. So by default, you're the ginger. But if you choose to be the guy with the pointy nose, then it'll swap the character that would have been that character to the ginger, so that you don't have the same guy twice. And what's another thing? Oh yes, the clock. So where is that? So I have my time progression, and so it will add to a variable every few seconds, and once it reaches an hour, it'll reset the minutes. Once it reaches 24 hours, it'll reset the hours. And then I have a clock. So there's an analog clock that I made these different clock hands for. So we've got the base of it, which changes color with the time of day, and the hour hand, which moves every 30 minutes. So you can see I'm cycling through it here. And then these are the minute hands, and then those are the character portraits. Let's see. Yeah, and then here's how my troops work. That's what they call the enemy teams. So you can have, I think the engine will allow you to have up to 8. I'm just only doing up to 6. And so, normally people would have like all the enemies appear at the same time. But what I'm doing is using a option called appear mid-battle. And so what I do is if the first enemy is below a certain level of health, then it will do some math appropriate to its rank. And then once that's done, it will repeat that for each monster. So the first one will only call the second one. Once the second one gets below a certain amount of HP, it will call the third one, and so on. But if you have a second party member with you, then it will make the second enemy appear, or it'll make the third enemy appear if you have 3. And so another thing that I have is the come back pack. So it's an instant revive kind of situation. If you have it equipped, it'll be like, whoa, the come back pack revived you. And then it will remove it and delete it from your inventory. Yeah. And then here's the classes. So this is how the player's stats are set up. So I have Twink, Otter, Bear, Geek, Jock, and Daddy. I'm not sure if I'll end up using that one. But they all have a proficiency in a certain element. Their stats are all different, but they learn pretty much the same moves by leveling up. And yeah, so that is the story. That is the RPG Maker story. I'm sure there's stuff I didn't really touch on that maybe you want to know more about. If you do, just let me know. Hope you enjoyed this, and